Hi, and welcome to training number 11, where we're talking about liver flushing. Now, liver flushing is definitely a bit more of an advanced topic, and as I'll be warning you repeatedly during the video, don't do it without the proper preparation and without being ready. However, I want to give you the system which I found, which is the very best, the very most effective, and the least painful and troublesome. So, first of all, let's look at why we'd actually want to do a liver flush, right? Benefit number one would definitely be better digestion. A lot of the reason why we struggle so much with digestion is because our liver is overloaded and it's not able to produce enough bile. Normally because it's kind of blocked full of debris, which means that it goes from producing as much as like a pint or two of bile a day to even just a few teaspoons full, which is obviously not good. So one of the benefits that we get is much better digestion when the liver is flushed out and when the liver is clear. Another one is better skin. One of the reasons why our body tends to have bad skin is because we detoxify for the skin. In fact, as I taught you in an earlier video, it's one of the easiest ways to detoxify. It's one of the clearest ways for the toxins to leave the body. But of course, if your body's overloaded, then that's going to start to make the amount of toxins leaving via the skin more and more. Then there's much more of a chance of that attracting some kind of opportunistic organism, like an infection in other words, and then you can end up with fairly serious and troublesome and chronic, hard to get rid of skin conditions. So often an overburdened liver is at the root of that, and especially, and this is probably more rare than the classic ones like eczema and psoriasis, dermatitis, but especially where the skin is kind of quite hard and woody. That's a classic sign of the liver being overloaded. So definitely in that case, you want to look at the liver first and foremost. Less liver-related symptoms. Now, I know I could have been a little bit more specific with that, but there are so many things which potentially relate to the liver. This book, by the way, this training, by the way, does get some influence definitely from the book The Liver and Gallbladder Flush by Andreas Moritz. I haven't got a slide with his name. I can put that underneath if you guys are interested. Anyway, in that book he does a great job of showing how pretty much every health problem is potentially related to the liver, and it's not really an exaggeration. I mean, if the liver goes wrong, then every other bodily system does suffer. So it directly or indirectly it is related. Things of particular note though would be emotional symptoms like anger, lack of creativity and ambition, jealousy, envy, guilt. Those are kind of emotional things. Physical things, headaches, especially acute headaches like migraines, neck and shoulder pain, bad circulation, especially to the extremities, the hands and feet. They would be some of the classic obvious signs that we've got something going on in the liver. So all that kind of stuff and a lot more we can expect to diminish. Better circulation, okay, let's just cover that again. Better circulation throughout the body, which will mean we're going to be more warm in general, by the way. It's not just the extremities. If you're like, well, my hands and feet isn't the problem, I'm just always cold. Well, yeah, that would be a liver thing too. And a better feeling about life. I must say, when I did liver flushing, that was the most staggering difference that I noticed for myself, was going from feeling very flat about life and about myself to feeling really good and feeling ambitious, but not like, oh, I've got to achieve loads, but just like, yeah, I can actually do something in the world. I can do more than just get by. So that was one of the transformations for me, and I've experienced that in a lot of clients. It helps to free up their urge and their desire and their drive to experience something new, which is obviously where all good things come from, from embracing something new in your life. So let's look at some of the most common myths of the liver, right? One of them is that only seriously ill people have liver and gallbladder stones. You may be like, well, I have no idea about that myth, but if you research this, then you may well come across that. It's something especially promulgated by the medical establishment. That's why I would just point that out. Obviously, I can't talk about medical conditions legally, right? But I can say that in people who don't have any medical conditions, the idea that they are completely free of debris in their liver is inaccurate based on our experience and even based on x-rays of the size of a liver before and after a series of flushes, where it can significantly reduce. So Yeah, I would definitely classify that as a myth, right? The reality is the vast majority of people have some. Not everyone does, and some people may not have much. In fact, this is a really great time for me to do this particular training because my wife and I both just happened to do a liver flush last week. In fact, less than a week. Actually, yeah, 7 days ago today. She really wanted to do it because she hadn't done it fully before. I've done quite a few. Maybe, I don't know, 10, something like that in total over the course of 3 years. So not obsessively, but I did it as much as I felt was necessary. Anyway, so we both did it. It gave me a good example of what it's like to do it when you're doing okay, which is how I'm doing. And I just released like a handful of little stones once, and that was good. And I felt significantly better. I felt energized. I felt more able to focus. I felt more inspired to create stuff. Hence this video, and I've made a lot of other ones over the course of the last week. And seeing her, and she was in a position where she was really struggling, and she released just a phenomenal amount of stones. Phenomenal. And we'll talk about different kinds of stones later. I'll tell you a little bit about what happened with her. But it was shocking, and it was a sign of how much it can vary, right? And just because you may not have that many of stones doesn't mean that you're not going to feel massively improved if you get them out. Okay, so most people do, and even if you don't have many, it's still worth clearing them out. Another myth is that liver stones can simply work their way out, however, on their own, naturally, shall we say. The truth is, they can, but the intestines need to be really clear first, right? So you don't technically have to do a liver flush protocol like I'm showing you here to get those liver stones or liver debris, as I prefer to call it, out. But you do have to really, really clear out the intestines. And what a liver flush basically is, I'll sum up for you now in a nutshell, and of course we're going to go into more detail about it during the training. What the liver flush basically is, in essence, if done properly, is where you temporarily, very, very thoroughly clear out your intestines, and then you just encourage your liver to turn itself inside out, back to front, to release every bit of bile that it's got. And in the meantime, while it's trying to get rid of every piece of bile it's got to process this sudden influx of fat, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it will also at the same time release a lot of that debris which is stuck in there. And that's basically how it works. And in the process beforehand, we've dilated the bile ducts and we've just got it ready. So basically, it's a two-step process. What we do is we clear the intestines, and then we kind of do something to trigger the liver to shoot as much as it possibly can out of itself while the intestines are clear. And in a lot of cases, it's preferable to give your liver a helping hand, right? So even if you could technically eventually be free of liver debris just by constantly clearing out your intestines, you may as well just fast track the process. Fact, the liver is the most resilient organ in the body, okay? It's so regenerative, in fact, that you can cut out up to 80% of it and it will grow back in the space of a couple of months. So just phenomenally regenerative, right? However, it's still, it's constantly busy. It constantly has work to do. I mean, it's not just doing detoxification. It also does the process of digestion, also does the process of blood cleansing, does the process of storing sugar, digesting proteins and fats as well, creating hormones, methylating almost every constituent in our body, enzymes. It's got loads and loads and loads of functions, right? And all of these things have to be done all the time. It's not like it can ever have a break. So while it is the most resilient organ in the body, your relentless lack of support for it, to put it in a very blunt way, can eventually get it down. And of course, I'm saying that tongue-in-cheek, knowing that I had a really overwhelmed liver because of my relentless lack of support of my liver. And I'm very, very glad that I discovered before it was too late that I could learn to love and look after and occasionally even support my liver, like I'm teaching you how to do now. So before you embark on a liver flush, right, you clear your small and your large intestine thoroughly. That's the name of the game. I was actually hesitant about creating a video about liver flushing to go out into the public, Up until this point, not that it's some big secret, of course, but up until this point, I've only ever done it with clients, and that's because I know from experience that it can create some side effects, right? Just to warn you. Now, in every case, pretty much, that I've experienced it, it's always been because the person didn't prepare themselves to the degree which I outlined for them, right? So, so long as you do all the preparation involved here, and so long as you don't have any medical conditions, and if you do, then obviously you need to ask a doctor first. This is likely to be relatively harmless, and if anything, you might just feel a little bit lower energy for a couple of days, and like you need to rest a bit more until your body has a chance to kind of recuperate from the process of getting this waste out. But if you don't, then that's where the problems can show up. But the reason I created the video anyway is because all this information is out there about how to do a liver flush, and I felt a lot of it wasn't guiding people on how to do it in this safe way. So that's why I provided that for you. And while the book I mentioned earlier does do quite a lot of mentioning that you need to clear out your intestines, for some reason I noticed that most people who have read it don't seem to have got the message with that. So I just want to highlight that for you, like super again. In fact, I don't know how to put red flashing lights in a video, but if I did know, then I do it here, right? This is really important, right? Clear out your small and large intestine thoroughly. If you don't, then don't proceed with the rest of the steps of the liver flush that I'm going to outline for you. So I call this the Health Mastery Liver Flush. As I say, I didn't make it up myself, but this is a unique way of doing it. I have simplified it massively, rather than complicated it, which is what most people do, I think, when they try and adapt something to make it their own. I just wanted to make it as simple as possible for you while still actually working. So if you are familiar with other liver flushes, you may notice, oh, this is missing, oh, that is missing. If so, the reason is because we found that it's just unnecessary, right? And possibly even counterproductive, but usually just unnecessary. So yes, it is all purposeful, although as always, feel free to ask any questions in the comment section below if you'd like to just double check that before you go ahead. Yes, it's the as simple as possible version that works. Okay, I'm sure there are simpler versions available, but they don't work as well as this. So, in terms of preparation, I've highlighted how important it is. So, what do we need to do? Well, most people talk about taking apple juice for a week beforehand, or maybe apple cider vinegar, malic acid. Don't worry, you don't need to write that down, because I found it's completely unnecessary, right? Doing a liver flush at the culmination of a small intestinal cleanse is ideal if you're up for that, though. And the people who I've known who've been most successful have tended to do it that way. My wife, actually, who just last week released a phenomenal amount of stones and feels massively better, did it that way. She did a small intestine cleanse just for a few days beforehand. So the small intestine cleanse from last month, it would be definitely ideal if you were to follow through on that first, and then at the end of that, rather than going back to eating a normal diet as outlined there, we would want to do the liver flush as the culmination of that small intestinal flush. During that, like a week before in a preparation, I would recommend though, eating as little as possible bad fat, right? So trans fat, fried fats, also, you know, just vegetable oils, any kind of vegetable oil that's not cold pressed, especially. And of course, we talked about that before in a previous training. And just generally easily digested foods, right? Now, I'm not going to give you a list here because everyone is different. Generally, you know, gluten, dairy are particularly hard for a body to digest, right? Meat generally tends to get stuck and rot quite a lot. But you know what? I'm going to leave it up to you. You, by now, I hope in this process of mastery, you know as well as anyone, better than anyone, I imagine, what makes you feel good digestion-wise and what leaves you feeling blocked. So just avoid that blocking food for that week, right? I know you like it. I know you want it sometimes, okay. But just don't have it on the week before the liver flush, okay? Deal? So optional extras for liver support. Now I've put these as optional extras because I don't want this to be like a big pitch for products. However, I would recommend ideally going for all of these before, during and after your liver flush to make it as easy and effective and pain-free as possible. Putting MSM in your water as a general rule for the week before, during, and the week after is a great policy. MSM is a white powder which is a natural extract from tree bark and well, just wood, yeah, wood pulp. And it helps the liver detoxify. We want to be careful with that one if you've never used it before. Just have it in small doses. Something like a quarter teaspoon or a half a teaspoon per litre of water is good. If you're already familiar with MSM and you already have it normally, as a result of my advice, then you can always increase up the dosage a bit to get to the next level with your liver flush. Cleanse herbs. I'm thinking here particularly of my cleanse blend at Lionheart Herbs, but you know, to be honest, any decent herbal formulation dedicated to cleansing from a company that you trust would be just great. Zeolite, which is a type of volcanic magma classified as a clay, which is excellent for detoxifying heavy metals. This isn't directly flushing the liver, but all of these are to support the liver during that process so that it's got as little extra work to do as possible, right? So it has the least extra work to do as possible. So the MSM will help support the liver in doing its everyday stuff. The cleanse will help it to prepare and strengthen and reduce inflammation, so it's less negatively impacted by the flush, the process of removal of these blockages. The zeolite is there to help the body detoxify all the really nasty stuff, to take that burden off the liver. And then liver rescue as well is less of a cleanse herb formula, more of a liver support formula. That one is from Health Force Nutritionals, and I really like that one as well. I use that one personally too, even though I have my own herbal supply. I love Health Force's stuff. Generally it's really great. So yep, go for that one too. And then in terms of foods, artichokes and radishes are really excellent. Radishes can be consumed in any form, of course, especially juiced. And yet any kind of radish, the big white ones, the little red or pink ones, the black ones, any radish is great for the liver. Artichokes, we're talking about globe artichokes here, the ones that are like the big, very hard flowers, not the root vegetable, although that's good for you too, but not so much for the liver. Artichokes can actually be juiced should you want to not cook your food, but generally artichokes are best eaten cooked, and then the heart especially is eaten, as well as kind of the leaves are quite often scraped. Awesome, love those two, especially, well, to be honest, I love artichokes. I like radishes though, right? Love artichokes. Would highly recommend those as part of your diet during this period. So, in order to complete this liver flush, you do need to take 2 days out of your life, right? Just a weekend is ideal. Now, what do I mean by out of your life? I mean that you really want it to be like a retreat. You know, I'm not saying you have to go anywhere, but you know, in terms of work, you do it while you have 2 days off, right? So you're not working. If you're someone who has your own business like me, then you just have to make the time. If you have a job, then, you know, again, you schedule it, or, you know, do the rota and check when you have 2 days, and that's your time, all right? And then in terms of your personal life, it's pretty much the same thing, especially if you have a lot of responsibilities in your personal life, you know, people you look after, whether children, parents, whoever. Find alternative care for them for those couple of days. I know that may sound like a lot, especially if you're a mother, but, you know, father, you know, their grandmother, whatever it takes, right? Hand them over for a couple of days, or at least for the peak points of those couple of days, which I'll talk you through. But really, preferably all the time, because other than having this small intestine clear, the other key factor in this liver flush working is that you have peace and quiet and rest. And if you don't have that, ideally, ironically, despite the liver being this most regenerative, adaptive organ in the body, it's, in terms of its temperament, it's the least in favor of stress and change. It likes just stability and relaxation. So people will find they have far more effective and profound liver flushes if they have minimal distraction, minimal stress, minimal responsibility, minimal activity, and they can just rest and relax. You know, normally I would say do your best, and if you can't manage it, don't worry about it, go ahead, but take action. But in this case, I'm really saying to you, no, don't take action on this until you're willing to do whatever it takes to clear those 2 days, right? And yeah, it is better to wait. If you've got to wait 2 months until that's going to be the case, that's not, obviously that's unfortunate, but then you should wait until those 2 months. I would recommend anyway. right? No such thing as should, but I would recommend you wait until you can really have that space and that peace and quiet. So no stress, no work. If you can't arrange it, don't do a liver flush. And you know, I guess ultimately you can arrange it, right? It just may take time, it may take resources, it may take some arm pulling and some bribing and whatnot, but it's worth it, right? Let everyone know you're busy and unreachable. So even when you've created this safe space and time, you know, if you're like most people will still try and intrude on it and get you to follow along with their agenda, and you have to just be very clear that you are not available. It's important to have a colonic hydrotherapy session as well, either the day before you start or the first day, ideally. So during that 2-day period, either the first day or the day before the first day, that's when you want to have a colonic hydrotherapy session. We've really talked about that. We've interviewed a colonic hydrotherapist, and we've talked about that in the clearing the detox exits video, so you can refer back to that if you want to know more about that. So here we go. Here is the liver flush. Yep, that's pretty much it in terms of preparation. To prepare, we want to, you know, reduce the amount that we're poisoning ourselves, create 2-day space where we have no stress, and ideally have a colonic hydrotherapy session. So day 1, how do we begin? So day 1, what we're doing is we're having no food all day, especially no fat, fiber, or protein. And the way I'm saying it that way is if you wanted to have a little bit of fruit earlier on in the day, or a little bit of like only carb food, like what else could it be? A little bit of cooked grain, I guess, even cooked quinoa or millet or something, then that would be okay. Better to just have juices, right? Because there's still fiber, obviously, in quinoa or fruit or whatever. So ideally, we just want to have juices. We can have fruit in the juices, so we can have calories, but we don't want any fat, we don't need protein, and we ideally want no fiber either. Also, we don't want any supplement, except the ones that I mentioned earlier, right? So you can have your liver herbs, your MSM, and your zeolites, and that's pretty much it. So all your usual stuff that you would ideally be having, right? Like omega-3s and mineral supplements and vitamins and all that kind of thing. Just leave that out just for these couple of days, just for these 2 days, okay? You can go back again after day 2. So here's what I recommend. Start the day with 1 liter of water, right? You can put lemon juice in there. That's great. It will help the liver. You can put MSM in there. Both optional. But 1 teaspoon of magnesium chloride per pint of water is obligatory, right? What that means is that that's an essential part of the cleanse. Because it's that 1 teaspoon of magnesium chloride per pint, so in other words 2 teaspoons per litre, which is going to create that full-on clearing of the small intestine and large intestine, which prepares you for the full-on flushing of the liver, right? So magnesium chloride, by the way, you can buy it in many different forms. I buy it, use it and sell it, in fact, in flakes, magnesium flakes. These are often sold as bath salts. We just want to be careful if we buy them that way, that all they say on them is that the ingredients are magnesium chloride or magnesium chloride hexahydrate. Either way, those are just fine. And you know, if you're familiar with my stuff and it's still around by the time you watch this video, just go for magnesium flakes online, Hot Herbs. They're very affordable as well. I think they're under like $5, something like that, for a big old pack. So when you've had that water and magnesium chloride, have some fresh juice. Now bear in mind the purpose of this is to clear you out, right? So don't get freaked out if you notice some intestinal rumblings. Don't be freaked out if you need to rush to the toilet fairly quickly. That's the point. The point is that you're just gonna, wherever you're at, you're just gonna clear out your intestines from the start of day 1 onwards, okay? So when you finish drinking that, have some fresh juice. You can just have vegetable or with fruit. Adding radish and beetroot is desirable. Beetroot is another liver supporting herb food, kind of. Not quite as strong as radish or artichoke, but still awesome. So it would be recommended. And 1 litre of juice would be a good amount again. Now, all these recommendations in terms of quantities, by the way, are for a person who is a standard size, which is about 150 pounds, 70 kilo, 11 stone, right? Which is what I am. but actually it really is an average weight. If you are obviously like 6 stone, 80 pounds, then adapt it, right? If you're 300 pounds, adapt it. So, change it depending on your own weight. So it's around these recommendations for a 150 pound person, okay? If you feel cold, then have some warm tea. And after a litre of fresh juice, on a day where they're not eating any food, most people will feel cold. I guess if you're in a hot climate, you won't necessarily, but that's pretty common in most climates. So in that case, have some warm tea. Cleansed tea is excellent, but really any herbal tea will do just fine. Just no caffeine, obviously, no green tea, no normal black tea, no coffee, but any kind of herbal tea is good, although some kind of liver cleansing thing would be ideal. So then you have the magnesium chloride, 1 teaspoon per pint with every glass of water that you drink, right? And you're drinking water throughout the day. So do you just keep having more and more water with magnesium chloride? Well, no, not quite. You basically do this until you get loose stool, as it's referred to, or diarrhea. So you keep having the water and the magnesium chloride until you're running to the toilet every, 10, 20, 30 minutes, something like that. And then you know that you've reached that point where there's a good chance that your intestines will be thoroughly cleared out by the end of the day, which is what you really want. So once that starts happening, then you can discontinue the magnesium. So carry on having the water just without the magnesium. We actually want that result of you having a loose stool. You want to be having so many movements, you start passing just liquid. Okay, so if by the evening time you are still passing solids, or nothing at all, even worse, then you're not ready to do the liver flush, right? We want to, the way it works, the only way it ever always works, is if you are actually through your bowels passing liquids. That's really what you want to be getting to. I know it seems like a really, really weird thing to be aiming for, and in everyday life we absolutely don't want to aim for that, but for this particular purpose, that's what we're looking for. That's the only way you're going to be able to actually release stones, if you're that clear. So following this advice, you're likely to feel hungry and cold. Hope you feel suitably motivated and inspired by that. Possibly also thirsty. Not necessarily though. So the advice is really simple, right? And this is where I'm not going to say, at 8 a.m. have this, at 6 p.m. have this. I'm going to actually give you credit as someone who's looking for mastery, and I'm going to show you how to apply your intelligence to have the perfect amount of everything. So the advice is really simple, right? If you're hungry, then you drink juice. If you're cold, then you drink warm tea. And if you're thirsty, then you drink water. And then drink water even if you're not thirsty. You'll need a lot, right? So if you're just nothing in particular, then just drink more water. And so yeah, you can have a lot of fluids on this day, and that is definitely the idea again. Partly because you're going to be passing a lot of fluids out of your bowels, right? So we need to keep replacing those fluids. The main reason why medical doctors worry about fluid loss is because of the loss of water mainly, and the loss of potentially of electrolytes. You can always, I would hope that your electrolytes are nicely topped up as a result of following the advice in the previous trainings. However, if you feel that's a concern in any way, and certainly if you know it's a concern, then it would be great to also add the mineral supplement Rehydrate to all the water that you drink. So that will just replace all the electrolytes as you're losing them, and just guarantee that you're not going to run low on those either. And by 7 p.m, you would have your last juice, okay? By 8 p.m, you have your last tea. So you don't have to have them at those times, but I'm just saying, that's your cut-off point. 8 p.m, last tea. And by 9 p.m, you have your last water. Ooh. So you make sure you've had copious bowel movements by now, and that you've replenished lost fluids up until this point, right? So again, you're building up to a point here of this water, because once by 9 p.m, you're going to stop drinking, and you're not going to drink for at least a few hours, and ideally until the next morning. So bear that in mind as well, that if you might feel like resisting having too many fluids, you're going to stop by about 9 o'clock. So at 9:30 p.m, you would prepare what I refer to as your salad dressing. For those who are familiar with liver flushing, you'll know exactly what I mean. For those who are not, you'd be like, what are you talking about? That's the way I like to frame what we're about to do next, right? Don't think of it as anything as gross or weird. Just think of it as something, just making some salad dressing. So what we do is we squeeze the juice of fresh organic lemon and grapefruit. I guess actually you could say and or grapefruit to a total of about 150 milliliters, which is about five and a half fluid ounces. Okay. Then you put that fresh juice in a jar, and you add about 100 mils, which is about 4 fluid ounces or 3.5, of cold pressed organic olive oil. Then you seal the jar and take it to bed with you, right? You make sure your room is optimal for sleep, as I hope you do every night, but again, especially important now. So we want fresh air, even if it's just a little crack of the window being open if it's cold. We want it to be a good temperature. We want it to be comfortable for you, most definitely, so that there's the most chance that you'll be able to sleep. And we want it to be definitely undisturbed, as we've already talked about. So, with your sleep environment perfectly prepared and with your agenda completely clear, so there's nothing to do, just drink your salad dressing, preferably in one go, just to get it over with, and then go to bed, right? Lie on your back or on your right side, ideally. This is because of the way that the blood pools, and we want it to pool, if anything, on the right side, because that's where the liver is, and we want that area to be full of circulation, to be doing its thing. So yeah, that's basically it. Now, here is a really, really important point again, and this one's difficult for all you go-getters and mastery people out there like me. Relax, okay? Do nothing. You can attempt to meditate and hopefully you'll fall asleep, right? So just attempt to be aware of your thoughts. That's pretty much the most focused effort which I'm going to recommend to you. So no input at all, right? Not even gentle music or hypnotherapy tapes or whatever. You're just best off without any distracting input. Just being present, being relaxed, and attempting to fall asleep basically as soon as possible. And the best way to fall asleep as soon as possible is to have no input, right? And if your mind starts racing, then you can always use melatonin as a adjunct to sleep, right, to help you sleep. But ideally, we won't be using that. We will just, because it's something else for your liver to do again. Ideally, we're just going to do our very best to be silent and to be still in our body and in our mind, and be in darkness and feel cold, right? So no lights on either because they're stimulating, and then just allow yourself to fall asleep. Don't drink any more water, right? For now, once you've done that, as you'll probably be sick if you do. Just go to sleep. After drinking that olive oil lemon juice combo or grapefruit juice combo, it's quite common to feel a little bit nauseous, especially you can imagine, you've been having just juice all day, basically no fat, which is the main thing that you need bar for, and then suddenly you have a big load of fat all at once. Now the point of this is that generally the liver is always behind on bile production. There's always too much food, not enough bile. So when you don't have any fat for a day and you've actually minimized your fat for longer, ideally beforehand, like we talked about, it's best to do an intestinal flush beforehand and minimize that, then your liver actually gets a chance to build up that bile, which is very happy about, which is why sometimes, at least, one of the main reasons why we often feel better when we fast, or at least in some ways we feel better while we fast. So then when we suddenly have this salad dressing, the liver's like, oh my God, and it mobilizes to shoot out as much bile as it's been collecting as possible to deal with this olive oil, right? And in the process, this can make you feel a little bit sick. And while it does that, it tends to, because it's doing it so suddenly and jerkingly and violently compared to usual, where it's just trickling out, it's suddenly like, whew, and it throws out a lot of debris as well at the same time, right? And so the oil can make you sick, and the debris that it throws out can make you feel a little bit sick. So it's no big deal. It's perfectly normal, natural, and understandable. And you can also quite commonly feel thirsty. You might feel a little bit like you've been poisoned. No, not severely. Just like you might do if you're like me. If you've had a few alcoholic drinks, I certainly feel like I've been poisoned, something like that, because it is a poison. Then don't worry about it. don't drink water with it because it's more likely to make you be nauseous and to actually vomit. So just go to sleep instead, right? Just say it's okay. Don't panic. Don't worry. Don't fuss. Just go to sleep. By the way, don't panic. Don't worry. Don't fuss. That's always assuming that everything's cool with your doctor, right? None of this is medical advice. If you wake up more than 2 hours later, then you can have a little bit of water, right? So we're doing this about 10 p.m., something like that, 9:45, 10, 10:15 at the latest. So if you wake up after midnight, then fair enough, have a little bit of water, but keep it to a minimum, as it can still make you vomit. There's nothing wrong with vomiting, by the way. If you do vomit, I've vomited quite a few times doing a liver flush. I'd say probably 4 out of the 10 that I've done. And it never makes any difference whatsoever to the effectiveness of the liver flush, so long as, big caveat, you do it a couple of hours after you've drunk the olive oil, because by then the liver has already done its thing of releasing the bile and the debris, and so it doesn't matter if you vomit up the oil or anything else. We just want to keep it down for that period of time. The last time I did it, I'm pleased to say I didn't vomit and didn't even feel particularly nauseous. But it's quite common for me. It depends largely on how reactive your liver is. So from a Chinese medicine point of view, some people's organs are yin, some are yang. My liver is quite yang, so it reacts in a very acute, sudden way to things, and then it kind of resolves them quite quickly. Other people are more chronic. Like my wife is more chronic. Either way, don't worry about it too much. And yeah, if you're sick, it will tend to only be once, and then you'll clear, and then you'll feel better. And like I say, though, try not to let it happen straight away. Try and just hold that back so that your liver has a chance to respond to the oil first. If you need to have a bowel movement any time at night, then, especially as a result of the magnesium, if you kind of overestimate it slightly how much you'd need, then go for it. You do need to do that, of course. You can look for stones if you want, and, like 2-3 hours even after you've drunk your salad dressing, it's possible that you'll see them. They can come through, all the way through you, all the way through that 60 foot of small intestine. Is it 8 foot of large intestine? No, it's not that long. I really can't remember. But yeah, 60 foot of small intestine, the however many feet it is of large intestine. It can go all that way within just a couple of hours. So long as you have thoroughly cleared your intestines with the water, the magnesium, and the juice, as we've been talking about. If you're sick, it's okay. We talked about that already. Attempt to sleep until morning, okay? Even if you feel restless, some people have crazy dreams. In fact, that's really quite common. You might have very vivid, with intense emotions, dreams that feel very meaningful, all that kind of thing. Or you might just have very vivid, intense thoughts. Just try and not worry about all that and just get yourself to sleep, okay? When you do wake up in the morning, and as I say, stay asleep until morning, have water with more magnesium, unless the bowel movements continued throughout the night, right? So if the bowel movement stopped and you had you were able to have a decent night's sleep, then yeah, I am actually asking you to have more magnesium again, because what that's required for now is what the magnesium basically does is it draws water into the intestines, and then that encourages the intestines to flush. It also encourages peristalsis, which is the movement, kind of like snake-like movement and squeezing of the bowels. So it brings water to the bowels and encourages them to squeeze stuff through. And so we really want to do that because we want to. The challenge with this debris, which is in the liver, is that the liver is probably the safest place for it. Right? And unfortunately, it's kind of like a little design flaw we could ask God about when we die, maybe. The liver, unfortunately, doesn't have a hole out of the body. So when the liver processes all this really, really nasty toxic stuff, it can't just say, here we go, and plop it out. So it has to plop it into the small intestine, which is where your body digests food, which is not ideal, right? Which is sometimes, especially when it gets very overloaded, that's why people often feel nauseous, right? It's because, rather than moving it all the way through the intestines, it tries to move it out through the stomach, which is quicker. And that's why if you have food poisoning or alcohol poisoning or something, you'll want to intensely vomit, because it just wants to get that poison out as quickly as possible. Anyway, so there is no exit, direct exit from the liver, so it's got to work its way through the intestines, and we just want to have that water and that magnesium to encourage it to work its way through the intestines as quickly as possible, because that stuff is really nasty, and if it's left in our intestines too long, our body is going to attempt to redigest it, because that's what the small intestine especially does, and the large intestine, is it assimilates and absorbs stuff, right? Food ideally, but anything really. So we want to make sure it doesn't do that, and we do that with water and magnesium. Okay, I hope I've sold you on that concept now, that you need to do this bit, especially the next day. It can feel very tempting, like, oh, I had enough now, but no, you haven't. You've got to get that stuff out, right? So follow the recommendations. Assuming the bowel movements are stopped, you take enough magnesium to have another thorough clear out. Okay, I've made that unclear. During this thorough clear out, you should see stones if you're looking for them. If you don't really want to look in your toilet bowl, then fair enough. I'm cool with that. But probably at least the first couple of times you do it, you just want to make, you want to see if it's actually doing something. It's great to, it's a bit weird when people like take photos of them and show them to their friends and all that. And I'm not saying you should do that, but you want to actually see them, because there's something that's quite, most of us are quite visual creatures, more probably than we would care to admit. And so you can hear all this stuff about, health and how you have all these toxins in you. You can even kind of feel it, but until you see it, for most people, it's not quite real. So a liver flush is a great way of like, oh my God, that came out of me. That's horrific, So you can actually see it. Now, there's different kinds of stones. Say, my wife didn't show me again, but she described the different types that she had, and it was very interesting. There's all kinds. The most common kind is green kinds. They're kind of like almost bright or fluorescent green. They can be anything from the size of a small currant, like small raisin, all the way up to the size of a golf ball. The most of the ones that I've seen have tended to be pea-sized, maybe a little bit bigger, irregular shaped. And these are basically bile combined with cholesterol. So the bile is the green, cholesterol is the fattiness, bound around some kind of toxin, acid, parasite, something or other. And yeah, so it's good to get those out. They tend to not be that old necessarily. The really unpleasant ones are the white, stroke grey, stroke black hard ones. That would actually be hard as a rock. That would crack if you threw them hard enough at something. And they are the calcified lumps of waste. And the reason they're particularly bad is because they have obviously been building up for a long, long time. And those are the ones that, when they build up, would lead you to eventually to having a doctor wanting to remove your gallbladder. So if you do have those come out, then it's a great sign, obviously, that you've done something really wonderful, because you removed that before it's caused a serious problem. But it's also a great sign that you probably need to do more liver flushes, because you've probably got a lot going on there. It's also a great sign, by the way, that you've probably got some fairly severe acidity issues, or at least that you have had them at some point in the past during the stage where that stone formed. And it takes years for that to form to a kind of a visible, acknowledgeable size. So yeah, that's quite a thing, and it's great to get all those out. You may see I haven't really experienced much of those, but I remember I have seen all kinds of other bizarre stuff, I've seen stuff that made me think of Alien, the film, It's not uncommon for parasites to come out. And again, I wouldn't worry about it too much in terms of, trying to work out what it is or all the rest of it. Although, if that's your bent of character, then feel free. Just be happy it's out. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Although you can always collect it and have it tested if you want, right? If you were concerned about it. Especially if you have major medical issues, then that would seem to make more sense. But if you're pretty healthy already and you just see something weird, then don't worry about it too much. Talks about different kind of stones. We've already covered that. So once you've had your water, and you've probably by now been checking your bowel movements, seeing if anything comes through. It can take a while, by the way, but you normally have it, in the morning, if not during the night. Then you can have a juice again, right? And then once you feel hungry after the juice, later, and by the way, you can still have the hot tea as and when. I just haven't included it here. Once you feel hungry after the juice, it probably takes a couple of hours, you can have something light and solid. So for instance, a piece of fruit, a little salad, something low protein and low fat, basically, right? Again, you could have some cooked brown rice or quinoa or something like that, if that's your kind of thing. But yeah, low protein, low fat, some kind of carb. I would say something fresh like fruit or salads is probably going to be better than something cooked. But whatever you really whatever you feel like. And that's because we're doing that just to get you back into the swing of things. Like this, it's not like you wouldn't benefit from maybe fasting for a few more days, but obviously we're acting now as if you're on day 2 Sunday and you're going to be back at work at Monday potentially, right? So in order to get you back to that being feasible, we want to start eating again. So this is probably about lunchtime, right? You can have something small. Let that settle thoroughly, and generally, if you've fasted, even if it's only for a day and a half, you'll even a small solid meal will tend to sit quite heavily to begin with, and your body needs to get used to having that again. And then you can also have a more substantial meal towards the end of the day, right? Still lowish fat and protein, but a little is okay, So a huge handfuls of nuts or like a cream cake would not be recommended. But sure, cooking with a bit of coconut oil or having some kind of seed vinaigrette, salad dressing or something, or avocado, or whatever, would be okay, right? Gives you some idea. And same for fish. You can have a little bit of fish if you want to have protein, but we wouldn't recommend having a huge steak. Does that make sense? So, but yeah, a little bit's okay. So something light, basically, something easy to digest again, but a little bit more substantial, so that you feel like you're having a full meal with a balance of macronutrients, even if it's low on fat and protein. So then it's important to get a good night's sleep again, okay? Again, even if you don't feel like it, it's quite possible you feel on top of the world by that Sunday evening, depending on lots of different factors. But even if you are, don't get carried away and stay up till 3 in the morning if you've got to, get up at 7 to go to work. Make sure you get a good night's sleep again. It's important, right? There's no way that you're going to be fully recovered from this by Sunday evening, by the way. It does take a few days to fully recover. Is it possible that you're going to feel better than you have done in ages by Sunday evening? Yes. Or Monday or whatever? Yes. So we're just going to be careful with that and make sure we don't get too carried away, and still make sure that we rest and still make sure we are in recovery mode, okay? Because we need to be recovering. What we've done is, I think Andreas Moritz compares it to like liver surgery, minor surgery, which I think is maybe overstating a little bit because we're not cutting anything. But still, it's something that your liver has been through some degree of trauma, maybe, even if it's fairly mild, and we just want to give your body a chance to really recover from that. And more than that, I'd say your intestines have gone through a kind of trauma because they suddenly have this really, really nasty toxic debris dumped into them, and admittedly flushed out quickly as long as you're following my advice. But it takes a little while to recover from. So allow that recovery process. And again, even on day 2, don't do much. Right? If you have to do stuff again, like I talked about, if you have responsibilities, then you can do stuff on day 2 from lunchtime onwards, but really as little as possible is going to be best. Then the next day, right? Next day you can usually go back to your usual food. I wouldn't go to bacon and fry up for breakfast on the Monday morning, assuming this is a weekend. But keep it reasonable and kind of fade in slowly, but have something that you would consider to be substantial starting again on Monday morning, and go from there. Just keep it lighter than usual for the next week, ideally. If you don't feel well, even after having normal food again, it's usually an excessive acidity that causes it. The most common side effect that I've experienced, well, not personally, I've never had it, but I've had clients tell me they've experienced, is some kind of cystitis thing or bladder infection or something like that. And that's just because of the extreme acidity of the urine. Creating that kind of irritation, that kind of problem. So if that's the case, and we can test with pH strips as we talked about in previous trainings. If that is the case, then we can have extra green juices maybe than we would otherwise have, and we can use sodium bicarbonate to clear away that extra acidity. Okay, so don't allow that acidic condition to remain because it could be a problem. Just have more sodium bicarbonate to neutralize it. I'd recommend having a colonic session as soon as possible after your liver flush too. Some people say that it's most important to have it afterwards. I would say that's true if you're doing it the standard way, but if you're doing it the way that I'm recommending, then it's generally most important to have it beforehand. Because if you have it beforehand and then you thoroughly thoroughly clear out your large intestine with the magnesium and water and the large amounts of fluids like I've recommended, there's not going to be much chance of debris getting stuck in there. But still, having a colonic afterwards to guarantee that, especially if you don't feel well, or if it's your first time doing it, or if you're not in exceptional health already, is a really, really great idea. And then just in general, make extra efforts to keep the 4 elimination channels really clear. I know that you're going to be following through on that recommendation already, right? Every day. How clear are my lungs, right? How fresh is the air I'm breathing? How clear is my skin? How can I eliminate through my skin, right? How clear is my bladder, right? Am I properly hydrated and alkalized? And how clear is my large intestine, right? So you want to be focusing on all that again for at least a week afterwards. Again, even if you're feeling awesome, and you quite probably will be, but just don't forget about that, because you can kind of be up and down with this, and you can very quickly go from feeling awesome to feeling under the weather if you don't keep on top of this. So in terms of supporting the process, all the recommendations in High Energy Academy and or Easy Exhaustion Cure are triply important when you do this, okay? I said don't take the supplements, obviously, during the 2 days where you're actually flushing. But other than that, all the advice is really appropriate. So breathing, hydrating, alkalizing, tonifying, all that good stuff, right? And one of the main reasons why this cleanse won't work for a lot of people is because they're not doing all that stuff as a standard practice. So you are, I would hope, right? So you're going to be at a much better position than most people who practice this. It's worth it to do this, right? This liver flush is awesome. In fact, I'll tell you quickly, from my own personal life, I first did this, let's see, I think it's 3 years ago now. And it was a big breakthrough in my life. I did this out of just absolute desperation about having all these food intolerances, and I was going kind of crazy because I was getting to the point where there were like literally far more foods I couldn't eat than foods I could eat, and I was like, God, there must be something out there. And I was like Google searching it. By the way, 3 years ago, I'd only, despite what I do now, like 4 years ago, I had my first ever computer. So 3 years ago, I had the miraculous epiphany that I could search for this on Google. Yeah, what a thought. And 2 main things came up which actually looked like possibilities from trusted sources. One of them was urine therapy, drinking your own urine. I was like, what's the other one? The other one was this, liver flushing. And I was like, okay, what the hell, I'll try it. I'd never had a colonic certainly either, and that certainly wasn't appealing either, but I decided it's probably better than the drinking your own urine thing. So I went for it. I did this liver flush, and it was a profound shift in my life. It was the first time that I felt I had a real breakthrough. After I finished that liver flush, I went back to eating cooked grains and steamed vegetables, and I went, ugh, and my liver was just screaming at me, no! And I didn't eat it, and I didn't eat cooked food for 2.25 years afterwards. Now, that's partly because I was doing an experiment of being like 100% raw food and seeing how it went, and it was very beneficial in a lot of ways. Don't worry, by the way, this doesn't happen to everyone. If you're like, I don't want to be a raw fooder, you probably won't be. But this is what happened to me. And as a result of that, it started me on a whole journey of profoundly cleansing my body, alkalizing my body, balancing my body's blood sugar, getting all the parasites out of my body. And that last one was the even though the liver flush cleansing thing was the biggest noticeable shift, the getting the parasites out was like the final frontier. It was the thing that finally got me to a point where I felt that I was that within integrity I could be teaching other people about health mastery, because I had got to a degree that I didn't even know was possible in my health, my energy, also my mindset, my emotions, the degree of centeredness and presence that I felt, all this stuff, it's the incredible transformation. And although, I'm never going to put it down to one key thing, because the process of mastery is most certainly a process, this was a key shift for me. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be for you, but especially if you relate to the liver issues that we've talked about, the emotional ones and all the physical ones, then it's likely that this could be a big transformation for you too, right? So in my experience, this has been huge. And it's probably too early to say for my wife because she only did it a week ago, but I anticipate that if she goes ahead then and carries on, which we're talking about next, then it's going to be a huge transformation in her life too. So you may feel wonderful immediately. You may feel under the weather for a few days first. I'd say under the weather is just more likely if you are generally low health energy, and feeling awesome is generally more likely if you feel good. Okay, so just the way it is, because if you generally don't feel great, it's because you're generally overloaded, and so generally when you release some of that overload initially, you're just going to feel worse. We really talked about that in the detoxifying training, right? But either way, basically, you'll feel better within about a week or so. Everyone says that. I've even had clients who are the kind of, and I end up getting those people who've tried everything and nothing's worked. And then they see that I have this kind of, depth of understanding that most people don't, and so they come to me. And even the people who say to me, I've tried everything and nothing's worked, and then if I ask about the liver flush and they've done it, they always say, yeah, for a week I did actually feel better for a bit, but then it got worse again because the underlying issues weren't all resolved, of course. But everyone feels better for at least a while doing this, okay? Assuming that they do it properly, like we're talking about here. So, in terms of timing, some people say it's better to do this when the moon is waning, and I'm inclined to agree, right? What does waning mean? It means it's when it's going from full to new, right? From big to not there. Sorry, I'm not trying to patronise you. Just I knew nothing about this a few years ago. Just thinking maybe you don't either. So that's ideal. However, I wouldn't let the fact that the moon is waxing, which is where it's going the other way from new to full, stop you, right? In fact, we just did ours while the moon was starting to wax. My wife had this incredibly powerful release, and I had a perfectly decent one. So I don't think it's the deciding factor. It's just about, all other things being equal, it's something to go along with. This is basically because your body's fluids, right, have their own tides. Like, everyone knows that the moon affects the tides of the sea, right? So your body has their own tides, like sap in trees has tides as well related to the moon. Like, any kind of person who works with trees will know it's easier to chop down trees sometimes than others because because they have less fluids because of the moon, and so are the fluids in your own body. So during that period where the moon is waning, then your body's more up for releasing fluid. So it just makes it easier. But as I say, I wouldn't make it the deciding factor. Spring as well is a particularly appropriate time to start. But again, really any time works. So if you're in autumn or fall, for my American friends, don't think, oh God, I've got to wait half a year. Just go for it, right? I started mine in winter, which is apparently not supposed to be the best time, and it was still, as I've just related, one of the biggest shifts in my life. So again, just talking about optimal, but generally the best time is, as soon as you can be ready and prepared. Once you started this, it is ideal to repeat it until you no longer release any stones for 2 or 3 months in a row. Now, I must admit, I didn't really stick with that, and I must admit as well that I still sometimes need to do the liver flushes. So who knows, if I'd have stuck with it, maybe I would now be clear. I would encourage you to go for this, and the people who I know who have, which is admittedly the small percentage, all say that it's worked and that they're glad that they did. So while I can't personally attest to this, it seems to be a very good idea to me, and I would encourage it. I would at least make sure that you carry on doing it once a month until you have one session where you don't release any stones, which is what I did. So at the very least, it's basically do it every month, and as long as you're still releasing stones, then you've still got some work to do, right? Some people say you're actually worse off if you start releasing stones and then stop. I think that's a scare story, to be honest, to try and get you to do the whole thing properly. You are, so don't let that put you off. If you're like, oh my God, I can't imagine, doing this once a month and for God knows how long, so I'm not going to start. Don't go into that mode, right? Just start. Just do, a few is definitely better than 0. So just do your best with it, and do as many as you can up until you're clear for at least once, ideally 2 or 3 times, okay? And just once a month, same schedule, everything exactly the same. Once you're clear, right, let's assume that you do reach that lofty position, then doing this once or twice a year is still a good idea, as they can still build up again, right? Assuming that you're overeating, as most people do, assuming that you're living in a toxic world, which all of us are, assuming that you've got stress more than human beings were adapted to deal with through millions of years of evolution, like most of us are, let's just assume that this would be beneficial, which is the case, okay? And in the next training, what we're going to be looking at, we're going to be looking at the final frontier, the very thing which I said pushed me to the point of true mastery rather than just struggling and feeling like I was on that roller coaster, not knowing when I was going to get off. So I'm very excited to be sharing that with you. Tune in for that next month. Until then, I highly encourage you, if you have been following through in the recommendations so far, to make this happen, right? As long as you don't have any medical conditions that might contraindicate it, as long as your doctor agrees. This is an excellent practice to undertake, and I'm very glad to be able to share it with you. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, then please leave them below, and I am here for you to let you know anything which you may need to know so that you feel confident and safe and comfortable going ahead. So good luck, and take action of planning this even if you're not ready to go ahead with it, because this is something that can really make a huge difference to your health.